The Peking University recommendation spot that the real young master didn't want. I picked up a bargain. He was obsessed with love, eloped with a bad student, and dropped out of school, shattering his top-tier life. As for me, bearing the reputation of occupying someone else's place, I went on to become a rising star in the business world and even married his childhood friend, Willow. At the peak of my life, an accident happened, and when I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day of high school graduation, filling out my college application. In front of me, rows of colorful bullet comments appeared. Fake young master George is a thief who stole the true young master Makoto's life. In the previous life, it seems like the real young master was really love-stricken, eloping with a rebellious problem girl to drop out and start a business. He even gave his childhood fiancée to someone else. So stupid and tragic. Luckily, there's a chance to try again. This time the real young master has awakened. I want to see how the fake young master, who stole someone else's life, will fail this time. I quietly watched the bullet comments, curling my lips into a smile. Sorry, the road I walk is one that I carved for myself. Even if he were to be reborn 100 times, he can never stop me from reaching the peak and walking toward brilliance. Chapter 1. Suddenly reborn. On the day of filling out the college applications, I was only surprised for a moment before I quickly calmed down. Turning my head, I saw Makoto's eyes, which were startlingly bright. They seemed to burn with the ecstatic joy of something lost and regained, and the determination of something that was bound to be achieved. He glanced at me with a fierce look in his eyes, then ran out the back door of the classroom, rushing toward the graceful figure at the end of the corridor. Willow from class 1 of senior year, Makoto's childhood friend, who in the past life was to be my wife. Willow. Makoto's voice was choked with emotion, tightly hugging the slender waist of the girl, his certainty of reclaiming her. I love you, and this time, I won't let you go to anyone else. Willow was momentarily stunned by this sudden embrace. Then, an overwhelming sense of joy engulfed her. She clumsily but gently returned his embrace, patting his back in comfort, softly whispering, "Yes, I will always be here." The sunlight framed the silhouettes of the boy and girl in each other's arms, as beautiful as a carefully composed youth movie poster. At that moment, the bullet comments exploded on the screen, filled with unmasked malice and satisfaction. "Oh, this is right. The real young master should be with his self-reliant, deeply devoted childhood sweetheart. That silly bad student should just stay out of the way. George is nothing but a vile thief, stealing someone else's Peking University spot, stealing someone else's young master identity, and stealing someone else's woman. What a disgusting person." The real young master has finally woken up, and now he's definitely going down the road of a true male lead. As for the fake young master George, without his Peking University spot, let's see how he'll succeed in the future. Seeing these self-righteous bullet comments, I smiled. Everything I experienced in my past life replayed in my mind with perfect clarity. After Makoto was brought back to the Wong family, he grew disgusted with the rules of the wealthy family. Yearning for so-called freedom and true love, he became infatuated with that rebellious problem girl, Maria. In order to roam the world with her, he tore up his Peking University recommendation letter and publicly announced his cancellation of the engagement with Willow, causing Mr. Wong to suffer a heart attack and turning the entire elite circle into a huge joke. And I, the fake young master who lost everything when the real young master returned, the one now walking on thin ice, silently picked up the Peking University ticket he discarded like a broken shoe, and also picked up the engagement that he had despised. 10 years. I carefully stepped into the university gates, and then fought my way through to carve out a path in the Wong group, establishing my foothold. Every step I took was drenched in sweat and strategies that no one knew about. By the time I firmly sat in the CEO position, I was no longer the fake who needed to watch others' faces. Reborn again. I also want to see, without the halo of the fake young master, without the background of a prestigious university, can I walk on the road to success all on my own? The bell signaling the end of the college application came ringing. The homeroom teacher, wearing a spring breeze-like smile, walked into the classroom holding a golden embossed envelope, his smile almost overflowing with joy. The bullet comments immediately erupted. "It's here. It's here. The Peking University recommendation letter for our Makoto has arrived." In the past life, the fake young master started changing his fate by stealing this spot. After that, he lived a life of glory. Now that Makoto is awake, let's see how he plans to steal this time. I didn't change my expression, watching the homeroom teacher smile like a blooming flower. He cleared his throat and loudly announced, "Congratulations to our classmate Makoto, who has earned the Peking University recommendation spot for the Department of Physics with excellent grades and has been admitted early." A thunderous round of applause erupted in the class. Countless envious gazes turned toward Makoto. This time, he didn't refuse the recommended spot but instead accepted the recommendation letter from the teacher's hand. "I accept the recommendation. Thank you, teacher." After that, Makoto turned his head and his gaze locked onto mine. His pale face showed no attempt to hide his smugness. Along with a sense of satisfaction that his revenge was about to be fulfilled, he leaned toward me, whispering in my ear, "Did you think I would refuse this recommendation? I guess you're really disappointed." The bullet comments rolled past immediately. Ha ha ha. I'm ready to watch the fake young master look like a lost soul. He must be furious now. Ah, it's perfect. The spot is back where it belongs. The fake young master's dream is shattered. Makoto did it perfectly. Next, he'll ditch that trash problem girl and go to the same university as the female lead, taking back everything that belongs to him. This is the real young master script. I didn't say anything. Makoto took a deep breath as though he was about to exhale all the pent-up frustration from his rebirth. George, I'm really sorry. This recommendation was always meant to be mine. The feeling of things returning to their rightful owner is really great. Without the background of Peking University, tell me, what can you possibly achieve in the future? He stared at my eyes, trying to find signs of collapse, despair, or even a hint of anger, but there was nothing. His face froze, clearly dissatisfied, but I really didn't care. The college entrance exam is important, and getting into a university is indeed a key step for success in life, but more importantly, it's about the right choices at every stage. I walked past him and calmly submitted my application. A key financial university within the province, majoring in finance. My score was just enough to enter the elite class. With my 10 years of experience in the business world from my previous life, the alumni network, location, and practical experience offered by this school are far more suited to my current starting point than the halo of a distant prestigious school. As soon as the bullet comments saw my application form, they exploded. Ha! The thief has no chance now that he lost Makoto's Peking University spot. So he's going to a crappy school, a key financial university within the province. Never heard of it. He'll probably just end up as a small accountant after graduation. Turns out he can't handle what he stole without the help of the Wang family and without the brand of a top university. Let's see how he flounders in life. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, not even bothered to refute. The students from the so-called crappy university, in their words, in my previous life, built one of China's most cutting-edge AI robotics companies and led the industry for decades. I packed my bag and prepared to leave when the back door of the classroom suddenly slammed open. A girl with a high ponytail barged in. The studs on her black leather jacket scraped against the doorframe with a loud clink, and several light gold streaks escaped from her hair tie, bouncing on her cheeks like little suns, accentuating the mole beneath her eye, which seemed to burn with rage. It was none other than Maria, the true love from Makoto's previous life, the problem girl. Her lashes fluttered, like a beast provoked, and she stormed directly to Makoto. Makoto, what the hell is going on? Yesterday you were holding me, saying we should drop out and conquer the world, saying these damn schools are beneath us. Today, you're accepting a recommendation. Are you playing me? The class gasped. All eyes turned to Makoto. His face immediately turned pale, and the confidence and pride he had earlier were replaced by embarrassment and panic from being exposed in front of everyone. He instinctively took a step back. Maria, what are you talking about? What am I talking about? Maria laughed through her rage, then kicked the empty desk beside me with all her might. The huge sound caused the whole class to fall silent. She pointed at Makoto, her finger trembling. You liar. You promised you'd be with me. You betrayed me for that pretentious coquette Willow, didn't you? The more she spoke, the angrier she became, and she even raised her foot to kick Makoto. Stop. A cold reprimand rang out suddenly. Chapter 2. Willow appeared at the door at some point. With a swift step, she rushed over, unhesitatingly placing herself between Makoto and Maria, using her own body to shield him. Her sharp gaze locked onto Maria, carrying the kind of oppressive air only an intellectual and top student could possess. What do you think you're doing? This is a classroom. Willow. Makoto looked at Willow, standing behind her, basking in her protection, his eyes full of affection. Maria, seeing this, was even more infuriated. She pointed at Willow and cursed. You pretentious coquette bitch. Makoto was tricked by you. Get out of my way. As she spoke, she tried to get around Willow to grab Makoto. The scene became chaotic. While Willow protected Makoto, she also blocked Maria's path until the teacher arrived, finally bringing this drama to an end. Willow comforted Makoto, her gaze inadvertently falling on my desk, which had been knocked askew in the commotion. On the edge of the desk was a small doodle I had idly drawn, a simple yet somewhat stubborn little butterfly. Willow's gaze lingered on the butterfly without her realizing it. Her brows furrowed slightly, a hint of confusion in her eyes. This butterfly, I feel like I've seen it somewhere before. Her voice was soft but clear enough for Makoto, standing right next to her, to hear. He suddenly jolted, following her gaze to the butterfly. A wave of panic seized him in an instant. In his past life, it was this fake who he had never taken seriously, the one who ultimately took everything from him. including Willow. Willow, let's go, Makoto almost shouted, interrupting Willow's focus, pulling her arm roughly as he tried to get her out of there, wanting to cut off any chance she might notice me. The bullet comments, which had briefly stalled in the chaos, went wild again. Whoa, this bad student problem girl is a mad dog. Makoto, run. Willow is showing full girlfriend power. Extreme protection for her men. I love it. Wait. Willow just looked at George's desk and said the butterfly seemed familiar. What's going on here? Did they know each other before? They definitely don't know each other. The fake young master lost his Peking University spot, so now he's trying to use this little trick to seduce Willow. Shameless. Always stealing the real young master's woman. Seduce? What a ridiculous and noisy assumption. I expressionlessly lifted my desk that had been kicked askew, erasing the butterfly doodle with an eraser. Then, under the sympathetic, contemptuous, or gloating gazes of everyone, I straightened my back and walked out of the classroom. The road that belongs to George has never required anyone's charity, nor does it need to steal from anyone. The admission notice was settled. The atmosphere at the Wang family was subtle. Makoto became the center of attention, with the aura of Peking University shining as the brightest badge, covering up all his past rebellious and extreme behavior. Mr. and Mrs. Wang wore their most sincere smiles in months, their eyes filled with proud indulgence as they looked at him. Makoto really brought honor to the Wang family. Mr. Wang patted Makoto's shoulder, his voice loud and proud. Peking University, Department of Physics. Great. This is how our Wang family son should be. George. Mrs. Wang glanced at me, her tone a mix of regret and dismissal. The Wang family has provided you with food, drink, and education for over 10 years. You had plenty of resources. How did you end up doing so poorly? I'm not trying to lecture you, but look at your brother and then look at you. The difference between people is really just born in them. There's no comparison. Mr. Wang frowned, his tone impatient. Clearly not one of our bloodline. Your head just doesn't work, we thought. Even though you were a bit of a bloodline mismatch. We raised you for so many years. We thought you'd at least make us proud and bring us some glory. And what happened? You only scored 600 points. And the school you chose is so bad. It's a pile of mud that can't be propped up against a wall. Dad. Mom. Makoto skillfully hooked his arm around Mrs. Wang's. Don't say that about brother. The financial university is fine too. After graduation, he can work as a small accountant. Live a stable life. It's perfect for him. The condescending tone in his voice was like a needle pricking at the skin. The bullet comments went wild. Ha ha ha. I'm dying. The Wang family parents finally see the true face of the fake young master. Junk university for a junk person. Perfect. But honestly, the Wang family could have raised a dog for 10 years and it'd still be better than him. How is this fake young master so stupid? I silently listened to these biting words. I didn't say anything. A score of 600 isn't particularly high, but it can't exactly be called bad either. However, if I'm not the best, if I'm not the so-called male lead in the bullet comments, then everything becomes meaningless. Before the admission letter arrived, I signed up for a national-level youth programming competition and even found a part-time job at a nearby milk tea shop. I did my best to earn money for tuition and living expenses. While Makoto slept in, I was already out. At night, while my parents asked about my well-being and shared various stories about Peking University with him, I dragged my tired body back, hastily ate some cold food, and dove straight into my room, sitting in front of my computer screen to code and debug my competition project. The bullet comments never ceased their ridicule. Oh, the fake young master is so hardworking. Is he happy being a little accountant? Faking it by typing on the computer. Does he think he's the reincarnation of Steve Jobs? Please. Experiencing life as a lowly worker. Might as well get used to it. This is probably how his life will be from now on. A few days later, the Wang family held a grand celebration banquet for Makoto's acceptance into Peking University. Almost all the influential business figures in the city and province attended, all congratulating Makoto and Mr. and Mrs. Wang. Mr. Wang, Mrs. Wang, congratulations. Your son was admitted to a top university. Truly a tiger father doesn't raise a dog. Young Master Makoto has a bright future ahead. The Wang family will have a successor. Mr. and Mrs. Wang were beaming with joy, and Makoto, wearing an expensive custom suit, was like a prince surrounded by stars, modestly and proudly receiving everyone's compliments. At that moment, a guest curiously asked, Mr. Wang, I remember you have another young master, right? Why isn't he here today? Mr. Wang's smile faltered slightly, and his tone became deliberately casual. Oh, you're talking about George? Don't mention him. His grades are horrible. He's attending an ordinary university in the province, and he's not on the same level as Makoto. For an occasion like today, he probably thought it wasn't appropriate to show up. Mrs. Wang quickly added, yes, after all, he's not really our child. His genes are different, so his grades are much lower. He probably felt embarrassed, so he decided not to come. Just as Mr. and Mrs. Wang were busy explaining and Makoto was basking in compliments, the atmosphere of the banquet grew warm again. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the door. The butler rushed in. His voice pitched higher. "Sir, madam, the provincial leaders are here. Also, there are admissions officers from many prestigious universities." Everyone was stunned. Provincial leaders, admissions officers from universities. They must be here for young Master Makoto. There are so many recommended students, but only young Master Wang can attract such big shots. Truly impressive. Mr. and Mrs. Wang were both shocked and overjoyed. Quickly adjusting their clothes, Makoto straightened his back, a smile blooming on his face as he prepared to welcome this unprecedented honor that was his. A group of individuals in jackets quickly entered the hall, with an important provincial leader at the forefront. Behind them were several others, elegant in manner, each wearing the badge of a different prestigious university. Representatives from almost all the top universities in the country were here. Mr. Wang's voice trembled with excitement as he quickly went to greet them, extending his hands. Director Marco, Secretary Mario, distinguished leaders, honored teachers, your visit is an immense honor for us. Director Marco from the Education Bureau grabbed Mr. Wang's hand with a firm shake, his voice loud and filled with excitement. "Mr. Wang, congratulations. Congratulations to you. You've raised such an outstanding son, truly a top-tier talent for the country." Mr. Wang was a bit stunned, instinctively glancing toward Makoto. "Director Marco, you flatter me. My son Makoto's acceptance into this university is indeed remarkable, but he hasn't." Makoto. Director Marco froze for a moment, his tone noticeably distant. "Oh, your son, right. I heard he got into Peking University's Department of Physics. Not bad, indeed." He casually nodded and began to eagerly scan the crowd, as if looking for some hidden treasure. The crowd was puzzled, but it was clear to everyone the big shot wasn't here for Makoto. Makoto, who had been smiling and eager to introduce himself to the leaders, was now completely stunned. His face turned pale. At that moment, Director Marco's gaze suddenly locked onto the corner. His eyes lit up as he spotted me, dressed plainly, just getting off work from the milk tea shop, still in my work clothes, having no time to change. His eyes suddenly gleamed, and his face quickly filled with a warm and enthusiastic smile. He pushed through the crowd and strode toward me. "Finally found you, George." Chapter 3. Director Marco's voice was full of praise and excitement. "Congratulations. Congratulations to you. You won first place with a huge margin in the recently concluded Flame Cup National Youth Programming Competition. Your Smart City Dynamic Traffic Optimization Monitoring System project was unanimously recognized by the judges as one of the most innovative and practical works in recent years. You've unearthed a top talent for the country in the field of artificial intelligence applications." The entire banquet hall fell into a deathly silence. Everyone was dumbfounded, staring in disbelief at this scene. Director Marco tightly gripped my hand and turned to Mr. and Mrs. Wang, who were still frozen in shock, and to Makoto, whose face was as white as paper, loudly announcing, "Mr. Wang, Mrs. Wang, your family is truly fortunate. With this national-level first-place honor, George has won the favor of all the top universities in the country. Admissions officers from the leading schools are here today." He pointed to the professors behind him, all eagerly watching me. They all brought extraordinary admission offers. "George, you can choose any university you want today. Pick any major you like. Scholarships, lab resources, everything is open to you." He paused, scanning the shocked guests around him, his voice resonating powerfully. "This is a true genius. This is the future pillar our country urgently needs. George, you've truly brought great honor to your parents and to our province." Boom. Makoto felt as if something exploded in his mind. The banquet carefully prepared for him, the prestigious aura of Peking University that he took pride in, the supreme glory he had just enjoyed, at this moment, was completely shattered by this fake in front of him. Someone he had never taken seriously, the so-called waste who only deserved to serve milk tea, with an honor he didn't even know existed, one that was so weighty it could crush everything. The rebirth script he had meticulously designed, the one he thought was a sure win, collapsed entirely in this instant. He stared at me with eyes full of hatred and disbelief. His hero aura, the one that belonged to him, was so fragile in the face of true ability and accomplishment. It was utterly powerless. The bullet comments, after a brief moment of disbelief, went wild. "What the hell? What just happened? National-level programming competition first place. Choose any top university. Wait, George, isn't he the fake young master? Wasn't he from a trashy university? This plot twist. I can't handle it." Director Marco completely ignored the real young master, his eyes only on the fake young master. Do Wang's parents feel embarrassed? Just after saying that their kid is a pile of mud that can't be propped up against a wall, the provincial leader personally comes to reverse the situation. Under the incredulous gazes of the crowd, I slowly lifted my head. my gaze calmly sweeping over everyone in the room. I gently withdrew my hand from Director Marco's firm grip, and in the breathless silence of the crowd, I took a step forward, standing under the spotlight. Thank you, Director Marco and all the professors, for your kindness. My voice was clear and steady, with no excitement, no bragging, just a calm detachment, as if everything had already been decided. It's an honor to receive this award. As for my choice of university, my gaze, intentionally or unintentionally, swept over Makoto's face, which had completely drained of color. A faint smile curled at the corner of my mouth. I will give it serious thought. After all, my voice was not loud, but it echoed clearly through the silent banquet hall. My road, George's road, has never needed to rely on picking up what belongs to others. The last few words hit like a hammer, striking Makoto's heart and shattering the last bit of pride he was desperately clinging to. Chapter 4. The Wang family's carefully planned celebration banquet ended abruptly in a way no one had anticipated. In the end, I didn't choose any of the top universities that had offered me special admissions. I politely declined Director Marco and the professor's eager invitations, and calmly signed my name on the admission letter from the Finance University. Majoring in finance, the university's top-tier program, coupled with solid regional connections, was more than enough for me to make my mark. The aura of prestigious schools was certainly dazzling, but I knew better what kind of soil I needed to grow the fastest and become a towering tree. While waiting for the semester to begin, I continued working at the milk tea shop. The bullet comments were still relentless. TSK, TSK, TSK. What's the use of winning a national award? He's still serving tea at a milk tea shop. Don't act so high and mighty. If you don't go to a good school, what's the point of experiencing life? The fake young master is just that, a fake. You can smell the poverty in his bones. At 9 o'clock in the evening, the last wave of customers left, and I grabbed 2 heavy black garbage bags, pushing open the back door. As I walked toward the large green trash bin at the alley's entrance, just as I was about to throw the bags in, I suddenly heard the sounds of an argument coming from deep in the alley. Get away, Maria. How could you drug me? You're shameless. Let me go. It was Makoto. My heart skipped a beat. I quietly moved closer, hiding behind the shadow of the trash bin. I saw Maria's long fingers press down hard on Makoto's lips while the other hand slid down the folds of his school uniform, heading toward his waist. What's the act? Makoto, you think you're so great, top student, you look down on me now. Huh. Maria's voice was thick with alcohol. I fought for you, skipped class for you, and you turn around and hug Willow's legs like that. What do you think I am? A doormat? She suddenly leaned in close to Makoto's ear and whispered maliciously, if I don't get an explanation tonight, I'll make sure you learn the consequences of messing with me. Makoto's eyes were full of hopeless fear. Call the police. But it was too late. In a split second, I quickly pressed the siren sound file on my phone and cranked up the volume to the max. Maria froze instantly. She looked around frantically, like a startled bird. I used every bit of my strength, lowering my voice to a roar. Police, don't move. Maria cursed under her breath. F***CK, and turned to run, stumbling away. I turned off the siren on my phone. Silently, I walked over to him, squatted down, and helped him put his clothes back on. Makoto shuddered, lifting his head. George, don't think that I'll be grateful to you for this. What happened tonight? Don't you dare tell Mom and Dad. And don't tell Willow. His voice rose sharply, filled with threat. Do you hear me? If you do, I'll make sure you regret it. With that, he roughly pushed me aside and, with his weak body propped up, left in a wild and desperate manner. The next evening, after the milk tea shop's peak hour, 2 police officers appeared at the door. Their gaze eventually settled on me. The leading officer pulled out his credentials. George, I calmly replied. That's me. We received a report. The officer's voice was clear. You're suspected of being involved in a hired assault case. Please come with us to the station to assist in the investigation. At that moment, 2 people walked in. Willow had a look of disbelief and disappointment on her face, and tightly clutching his arm was none other than Makoto. Officer. Makoto's voice cracked with sobs. It was him. He was the one who instructed Maria to hurt me. Yesterday, it happened in that alley behind there. Chapter 5. Willow's voice was suppressed with anger. George, I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person. I didn't. My voice was unusually calm. Didn't. Makoto seemed provoked. Are you telling me you don't know Maria? Are you really going to say you didn't instigate her behind my back? Just then, the police brought in a handcuffed person, Maria. Her eyes fell on Makoto's tear-streaked face, as if she had made a decision. She suddenly raised her hand and pointed at me. Officer, it's him. It's George. He gave me 5,000 yuan and told me to teach Makoto a lesson. He said all we needed to do was scare him a little, make him look bad. I was confused. It was all him. He told me what to do. Mr. and Mrs. Wang, I didn't know when they had arrived. but their faces were filled with disappointment, as if they were meeting the son they had raised for over 10 years for the first time. "George." Makoto leaned slightly toward me, speaking just loud enough for only the two of us to hear. "George, it's over for you. I really want to know what the outstanding youth, praised by the provincial leaders, is going to look like when he's in prison." I didn't panic. I didn't defend myself. I simply raised my hand and pointed toward the surveillance cameras in the alley. "Officer, the truth is there." The smugness on Makoto's face froze instantly. He followed the direction of my finger and, when he saw the small black half-sphere, his face immediately turned pale. Maria, seeing the surveillance camera, blurted out, "No. No way. When did that?" Her words stopped abruptly as she realized what she had just said. She quickly covered her mouth in fear. The high-definition footage from the camera clearly appeared before everyone's eyes. The footage showed two figures, Makoto and Maria. "What the hell is going on? Are you playing with me? You said we'd leave together." At that moment, Makoto lunged forward, almost pressing up against Maria. He lifted his face, using a deliberately soft voice as he said, "Maria, don't be mad." Then, Makoto took the initiative to wrap his arms around Maria's neck and kissed her. A few seconds later, Makoto released her, his fingers caressing Maria's face in a suggestive manner. His voice was lowered, but still clear enough to be picked up by the microphone. "Destroy George for me, as long as you ruin him. Tonight, I'll go with you." "No." Makoto, in a frenzy, lunged at the computer screen, trying to block the footage. "It's fake. It's all fake. George forged it. He framed me. Willow, help me. This is all George is doing. Why would I joke about my own innocence?" He desperately grabbed Willow's hand, clinging to her like it was his last lifeline. Willow stood there, her expression shifting from shock to disbelief, then to a deep sense of being utterly deceived and manipulated. Without hesitation, she ruthlessly pried his fingers off her hand, one by one. "Don't touch me." Her voice carried a chilling coldness. Mr. and Mrs. Wang were completely petrified. Their faces drained of color, their lips trembled, but not a single word came out. The lead officer's face turned ashen, and he barked in a harsh tone, "Makoto, Maria, you two are under arrest for false accusation, framing, and disturbing judicial order. Come with us to the station immediately." Chapter 6. The bullet comments had descended into absolute chaos. "I'm about to lose my mind." The real young master staged it all, and even initiated the kiss. Battlefield gone wrong. Using the rebellious problem girl as a pawn to frame the fake young master. This move is too devious. Has Makoto lost his mind? The fake young master is amazing. He's a total chess master. How did we never realize he was a top-level hacker? Truly hidden talent. Willow didn't leave immediately. She looked at me, her eyes filled with complexity. "George," she finally spoke, her voice carrying a sense of exhaustion that seemed to have crossed through time. I remember everything now." Her gaze pierced through me, as if she was seeing someone else from a different time and space. "I'm sorry. I was blind and deaf in this life. Give me a chance to let me." "Willow," I calmly interrupted her. "Let the past stay in the past. A person who has someone else in their heart, someone who can easily be blinded by tears and lies, whether in this life or the next, is not worth me wasting any more time on." Willow's hand froze in midair, and the last bit of color drained from her face. She gave me one last, deep look, then turned around and walked out of the milk tea shop, step by heavy step, disappearing into the bustling crowd outside. Makoto's fate was a mirror of his previous life, but this time it was even more tragic and miserable. The charge of false accusation was confirmed, and though the Wang family used considerable influence and money to prevent him from going to jail, the corruption of character mark was deeply branded on him. His university admission was swiftly revoked, and all the halos he had once relied on vanished in an instant. Mr. and Mrs. Wang were completely disillusioned with their own son. They gave him a sum of money, as if to rid themselves of an embarrassing trouble, then unilaterally declared that they had severed ties with him and expelled him from the Wang family. Abandoned by his family and disgraced, Makoto, in his despair and self-destruction, ended up turning back to the rebellious Maria. The two of them tangled together once again. They had no education, no skills, and could only struggle to survive at the lowest rungs of society. Arguing, fighting, and brief moments of reluctant intimacy became their entire life. As for me, George, I had long left all of this behind. The 4 years at Finance University were my time to accumulate strength and begin to shine. Solid professional knowledge, along with the sharp business instincts and far-reaching vision I developed in my previous life, made me stand out on campus. I turned down all the empty positions in the student union and dived straight into the financial market. Using a limited amount of seed money, I skillfully navigated the stock market's tumultuous waves, achieving a jaw-dropping accumulation of wealth. At the same time, I built my own team. Leveraging Finance University's powerful alumni network and local resources, I managed to bring the Smart City Dynamic Traffic Optimization Monitoring System project, the one that only truly took off in my previous life, into development and incubation several years ahead of schedule. On the day of my graduation, I didn't wear a graduation gown. Instead, I stood on the stage of the city's highest-profile financial technology summit, under the spotlight, facing countless business magnates, investment giants, and the media. During a media interview, I was asked what the secret to my success was. I smiled slightly. There's no secret. It's simply that I used the time others spent complaining, clinging to others, or wallowing in the past to walk my own path. The path is long enough, firm enough, and eventually, you'll walk into the light. After the interview, I politely declined the subsequent invitation to the party and walked alone toward a quiet lounge. At the end of the long corridor, through the large floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's dazzling night view unfolded. A slender figure stood silently by the window, her loneliness standing in stark contrast to the bustling city outside. It was Willow. She was holding the latest financial magazine, the cover featuring my profile as I spoke under the spotlight. She turned, looking at me, her gaze filled with complexity, amazement, regret, and an inescapable sense of loss, which eventually settled into a barely audible sigh. "George," she spoke, her voice bitter. I calmly brushed past her, not stopping, not even glancing her way. The sound of my polished shoes echoed crisply on the smooth marble floor, growing fainter and fainter. Her figure, along with the magazine, was left behind, swallowed by the shadows of the dazzling world outside. The bullet comments were still rolling. This is the true, glorious male lead in a feel-good novel. All along this long journey, George, he never once looked back. His magnificent life has only just begun.